Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to your next mini lesson. As promised last week, our unit was very short as we reviewed and discussed the rationalists and the realists surrounding the era of the Revolutionary War in that time period. We're going to be switching gears this week to Romanticism and Transcendentalism. I think you're really going to enjoy the last unit of the semester because Transcendentalism really marks a part in a specific point in American literature where transcendentalism is uniquely American. It's the first time we really have a voice that can be considered American and not a transplant or assimilated in from somewhere else. So I think you're really going to enjoy the unit. As you take your Cornell notes, be sure to write down any of the important information that you need and reach out to your instructors if you have assistance. And with that, let's get underway. Ralph Waldo Emerson said, "Good men must not obey the laws too well." And his aphorism illustrates a vital key to the American character because, after all, if the original colonists had obeyed the laws, the American Revolution would never have occurred and the country might not have existed. You see, it's this rebelliousness that it becomes a part of our heritage that reflects an essential aspect of Emerson's philosophy of transcendentalism. It's a distinctly American offshoot of the Romantic unit. And again, why this is kind of the turning point where we switch gears in American lit. Around the beginning of the 19th century, the movement known as Romanticism sprang up in both Europe and America as a reaction to everything that had come before it. The rationalism of the 18th century age of reason, and especially in America, the strict doctrines of Puritanism are pushed aside. Again, remember, it's a reaction to something that comes before it. We've been talking about that this entire semester. Romantic artists, philosophers, and writers, they saw the limitations of reason and celebrated instead the glories of the individual spirit, the emotions, and the imagination as basic elements of human nature. The splendors of nature inspired the Romantics more than the fear of God, and some of them felt a fascination with the supernatural as well. In the first half of the century, as the U.S. population exploded and countries' borders spread westward, the Romantic spirit guided American writers in their effort to capture the energy and character of that new country that continued to expand. Henry Wadsworth Longfellow and Washington Irving were by far the most popular American writers of the time. Their work exhibits a typical Romantic preoccupation with atmosphere, sentiment, and optimism. As we move forward and as we move further into the West, having that positivity as part of that culture was helpful and embodied that American spirit. Although Washington Irving was the first writer to achieve international fame, the first really distinctive American literature came from the Transcendentalists. The philosophy of Transcendentalism, derived in part from German Romanticism, was based on a belief that transcendent forms of truth exist beyond reason and experience. There's more than meets the eye in almost every aspect of life. However, Ralph Waldo Emerson gave this philosophy a peculiarly American spin, and he said that every individual is capable of finding and discovering this higher truth on his or her own through intuition. Now, one of his students and young friends, Henry David Thoreau, proved a prickly but brilliant embodiment of transcendentalist ideals, and he was militant in turning his back on material rewards, and he devoted his life to the study of nature and his own individual spirit as well. So where Emerson takes it to the beginning, Thoreau takes it a step further. His Walden, an account of the 2 years he lived alone in a one-room shack in the country, although he did come into town to dine regularly at Emerson's Boston home, where they could discuss these ideals, it remains a genuine American masterwork and something purely American, different than what we've ever seen before. And you'll read a little piece of that as well as we work through. Walt Whitman was championed at the beginning of his career by Emerson for the ideas and style that Emerson believed the new American poetry required. Still influential, as Whitman had been in the 20th century, he had to wait a long time for his contribution to be recognized by the larger public in his own time. His success came a lot later in life. In 1855, he had to print the first collection of his poems, Leaves of Grass, by himself, and he was able to only sell a few copies of the book. So he gave virtually all of the 795 copies of the book away. Meanwhile, in that same year, Longfellow publishes The Song of Hiawatha, which, like his earlier books of poetry, sold thousands, became a bestseller. So the Transcendentalists are so new and so different that their success takes time to develop and that change to take place. Where it's a reaction to what's happened, this action and the ability for the people to latch on and see it for what it was worth took some time. The celebration of individualism that began with Romanticism and flourished with Transcendentalism has remained at that core of American literature to the present day. During the first half of the 20th century, the poetry of William Carlos Williams and E. E. Cummings, among others, emphasized the spirit and power of solitary individuals. Contemporary writers, however, tend to temper their celebrations of the individual with a little more ambiguity. Rosario and Aurora Morales, for instance, try to find a new unity in their separate voices as mother and daughter, and the poet Luis J. Rodriguez makes readers view his eccentric aunt with a mixture of admiration and shock, a double-edged sword that really takes on the depth of human emotion. The down-home voice of Garrison Keillor is shaped by the humorous ironies that are a trademark of our time as well. So they take the Transcendentalism, and again, that reaction to that leads to action in something entirely different once again. And we're going to see that more and more as we move on from Transcendentalism and Romanticism onto the later eras of American Lit next semester as well. If you have questions, be sure to reach out to your instructor for assistance. Make sure you get your Cornell notes in. Feel free to view the video again if necessary as well. Going to be a great 3-4 weeks as we finish up Unit 4 and end the semester. Work hard, and if you have questions, be sure to reach out again. Have a great rest of the day, folks.